Under the frost-kissed moon, a single silver thread unraveled from the weave of silence, binding the unspoken to the edge of oblivion. Celine Varron's world had always been one of shadows and whispers she could never voice. Born into the Rook pack as an Omega whose tongue was bound by some cruel twist of the goddess's design. She had learned early that words were a luxury for those whose fates aligned with the stars. Her muteness was no mere affliction. It was a veil, thick as the perpetual winter shrouding the Iron Peaks, where the pack's ancient castle clawed at the sky like a beast frozen mid-roar. Snow fell in relentless veils, muffling the distant howls that echoed through the ravines, and the wind carried the metallic tang of blood from hunts long past. In this realm of ice and iron, Celine moved like a ghost, her presence felt but never heard. Her dark hair braided with threads of silver that caught the moonlight like veins of ore. She had served the pack faithfully, tending the hearths in the great hall where flames danced hungrily against walls of black stone, their glow casting long shadows that mirrored the fractures in her soul. King Tian Rook, the Alpha whose rule was etched in the scars of endless wars, had never truly seen her. To him, she was one of many Omegas, silent labor in a court rife with intrigue and betrayal. His eyes, stormy gray like the ash-choked skies before a blizzard, passed over her as they did the falling snow. Yet Celine watched him, her heart a hidden ember beneath the chill. She had etched his name into the quiet chambers of her mind, a secret mantra against the loneliness that gnawed at her like frostbite. The rejection came on a night when the moon hung low and bloated, painting the snow in hues of bone and blood. The pack gathered in the throne room, a cavernous space lit by torches that sputtered like dying breaths. Whispers of dissent had festered for moons, rumors of a rival alpha from the southern clans, hungry for the Rook throne, and accusations that the Omegas were weakening the bloodline with their cursed silences. Celine stood at the periphery, her hands clasped around the silver pendant at her throat. A simple thing, inherited from her mother, its surface etched with a crescent moon, cradling a drop of what looked like frozen blood. It was her anchor, cool against her skin, a symbol of the words she could never spill. Cian entered like a storm made flesh, his broad frame clad in a cloak of wolf pelts edged with iron mail that gleamed dully in the firelight. His face was a map of old wounds, a scar slicing across his jaw from a betrayal in the Frost Wars, eyes hollowed by the weight of a crown that demanded blood for every victory. He had lost his mate years ago to a traitor's blade, and guilt clung to him like the perpetual frost on the castle battlements. "The pack weakens," he declared, his voice a low rumble that vibrated through the stone floor. "We cannot afford the burdens that drain our strength." The elders nodded, their gazes turning to the Omegas clustered near the hearths. Celine felt the air thicken, the heat from the flames warring with the cold dread coiling in her belly. One by one, the others were called forward, those deemed unfit for the coming war, their fates sealed by whispers of infertility or frailty. Then her name was spoken, not by Hien, but by the beta advisor Thorn, whose eyes glinted with ambition sharper than any blade. "Celine Varron," he intoned, "the silent one. What use is an Omega who cannot call the pack to heal? She is a shadow, not a flame." Kian's gaze finally landed on her, piercing and indifferent. He did not speak, but his nod was decree enough. Exile, banishment to the wilds beyond the peaks, where the untamed forests swallowed the weak and the silver-backed hunters prowled under the moon's indifferent watch. No trial, no plea, only the finality of his silence mirroring her own. Celine's fingers tightened on the pendant, its edges biting into her palm, drawing a thin line of blood that welled warm against the cold metal. She wanted to scream, to beg, to tell him of the nights she had lain awake, imagining his touch as the only warmth in her frozen world. But her throat closed like a vice, words dissolving into the void. They dragged her to the outer gates as dawn bled gray across the snow-swept cliffs. The wind howled through the passes, carrying the faint huevos of the pack's sentinels, a chorus that mocked her isolation. Her simple woolen cloak, ragged from years of unseen toil, whipped around her legs as she was shoved into the blinding white expanse. No provisions, no farewell, only the pendant, heavy as a chain, and the echo of Kian's unspoken judgment. She stumbled forward, the snow crunching under her boots like brittle bones, each step pulling her deeper into the wilderness. The forest loomed ahead. Ancient pines bowed under their burden of ice, their branches clawing at the sky like desperate fingers. Celine's breath came in ragged clouds, the cold seeping into her bones, numbing the ache in her chest. She had always known rejection in the pack's sidelong glances, but this was death wrapped in winter's embrace. Hunters roamed these borders, humans twisted by old grudges, armed with silver that burned through alpha flesh like divine fire. Yet in her silence, she felt a stir, a hidden spark beneath the frost. The pendant warmed against her skin, the etched blood drop seeming to pulse with her heartbeat. As the castle faded into the swirling snow, Celine paused at the edge of a frozen ravine, the wind tearing at her cloak. Below, the world was a labyrinth of white and shadow, where secrets buried themselves in drifts. She touched the pendant once more, whispering Cian's name in the sanctuary of her mind. Cian, a vow unspoken, a love unclaimed. Little did she know, the threads of fate were already unraveling, drawing her toward the very heart she had been cast from, where redemption waited in the barrel of a hunter's gun. The snow devoured her footsteps as Celine pressed deeper into the forest's frozen maw, the pines whispering secrets she could never answer. Her breath hung in the air like fragile ghosts, each exhale a silent plea against the encroaching night. The pendant at her throat burned now, not with cold, but with an unnatural warmth that seeped into her veins, as if the etched blood drop within it stirred to life. She clutched it tighter, her fingers numb and raw, the metal a talisman against the void that threatened to swallow her whole. Exile was not just banishment, it was erasure, the pack's judgment carving her out like a flaw from unyielding stone. Yet in the heart of this wilderness, where the wind carved howls from the ridges, she felt watched, not by beasts, but by something ancient, lunar, pulling her onward. Hours blurred into a haze of white and shadow, the sun a pale specter sinking behind the peaks. Celine's legs trembled, the ragged cloak no shield against the bite of frost that clawed at her skin. She had foraged what little she could, bitter roots unearthed from snowdrifts, their chill mirroring the emptiness in her chest. Kian's face haunted her thoughts, his stormy eyes indifferent as the gales that now battered her. Why had he not seen her? In the quiet of the castle hearths, she had imagined his gaze lingering, a spark in the endless gray of his world. But rejection had stripped that illusion bare, leaving only the raw wound of unspoken longing. The pendant pulsed again, a rhythmic throb like a distant heartbeat, urging her toward a narrow ravine where the trees thinned, exposing a frozen stream that gleamed like quicksilver under the rising moon. A crack shattered the silence, sharp, unnatural, like bones snapping under iron. Selina froze, her pulse roaring in her ears. Not a branch, not the ice shifting. This was the report of a rifle, echoing through the passes. Human hunters. The silver-backed scourge of the borders, their bullets forged to pierce alpha flesh and unravel the sacred bond with the goddess. Fear coiled in her gut, cold as the stream's edge, but curiosity, a forbidden ember, drew her forward. She crept along the ravine's lip, the snow muffling her approach, until the scene unfolded below like a tableau from a nightmare. There, in a clearing scarred by jagged rocks, King Cian Rook fought not as the unyielding alpha of legend, but as a cornered wolf, bloodied and alone. His cloak was torn, wolf pelts matted with crimson that steamed in the frigid air. 3 hunters encircled him, their forms hulking in fur-lined coats, faces obscured by hoods etched with runes of old vendettas. Silver gleamed in their hands, rifles and blades, moonlight dancing on the fatal metal. Cian lunged, his claws raking the nearest foe, drawing a guttural scream that mingled with the wind's wail. But he was wounded. A gash across his side wept dark blood, soaking the snow in patterns like spilled ink. His breaths came ragged, eyes wild with the fury of a king betrayed once more. Betrayal. The word bloomed in Celine's mind, unbidden. Whispers from the castle had reached even her silent ears. Thorn, the Beta advisor, plotting with southern rivals, luring Cian into this trap under the guise of a solitary hunt. The king had ventured alone, seeking solace in the wilds from the guilt that gnawed him, the ghost of his lost mate a chain heavier than any crown. Now he staggered, a hunter raising his rifle with deliberate calm, the barrel trained on Cian's chest. Silver bullet. Instant death for an alpha, the goddess's curse made manifest. Instinct surged through Celine, a tidal force crashing against the walls of her fear. She should flee. Exile demanded it, survival whispered it. He had cast her out, unseen, unworthy. Yet her body moved before her mind could deny it, sliding down the ravine's slope in a cascade of loose snow. The world narrowed to the glint of silver, the pump of her heart, the pendant's heat flaring like a brand. She burst into the clearing, a shadow among shadows, positioning herself between Cian and the hunter just as the trigger squeezed. The shot rang out, a thunderclap that shook the pines. Pain exploded in her shoulder, white-hot and searing, the bullet tearing through flesh and lodging deep. Celine crumpled to her knees in the snow, blood blooming warm and sticky against the cold, staining her cloak in a vivid red that mirrored the pendant's eternal drop. The hunters faltered, surprise rippling through them. An omega, silent and small, shielding their prey. Cian roared, a sound of primal rage and confusion, his form blurring as he dispatched the nearest attacker with savage efficiency, claws sinking into throat and sinew. Blood sprayed, hot and metallic, the air thick with its coppery scent mingling with pine and frost. She gasped, the world tilting, but her eyes locked on his. Cian's face, smeared with gore and sweat, twisted in shock as he turned to her. Recognition dawned slowly, like moonlight-piercing clouds. Celine Varin, the exiled mute, her blood pooling around them like an offering. Why? The question burned in his gray eyes, a storm of guilt and bewilderment. He had condemned her, yet here she stood, fell for him. The connection hit like a physical blow, instinctive and raw, threading between them amid the chaos. Fear twisted in her chest, not of the pain, but of this vulnerability laid bare. She had denied it even to herself, this love forged in silence, born of stolen glances and unvoiced dreams. Now it stared back at her through his gaze, curious and denied, a spark in the gathering dark. The remaining hunters regrouped, rifles cocking with ominous clicks, but Cian scooped her up, his arms iron bands around her trembling form. His touch was fire against ice, the heat of his skin seeping through her wounds, stirring something deeper than pain, a bond, fragile and unbidden. You? Why? He growled, voice rough as gravel. But she could only meet his eyes, her throat burning with the weight of words trapped within. The pendant pressed between them. Its warmth a secret shared, as he carried her into the shadows, the howls of pursuit fading behind the wind's eternal dirge. And now, I invite you to leave a trace of your presence in the comments. Tell us where in the world you're watching from and the exact hour you hear this story. We wish to know how far these northern confessions travel, and at what moments of the night they find you. The cave's mouth yawned like a wound in the mountainside, jagged teeth of ice and stone guarding secrets older than the Rook bloodline. Tsian Rook plunged into its depths, Celine cradled against his chest, her blood seeping through his torn cloak to mingle with his own. The air inside was thick with the scent of damp earth and forgotten winters, a chill that clawed deeper than the wind outside. He moved with the desperate grace of a hunted beast, his boots crunching over frost-rimed gravel, the echo swallowed by the cavern's vast silence. Her weight was slight, fragile as a fallen leaf, yet it anchored him, pulling at the frayed edges of his resolve. Guilt twisted in his gut like a silver blade, this silent omega, cast out by his decree, now bleeding for his sake. Why had she returned to him like a ghost from his own regrets? He found a hollow deeper in, where the walls curved into a natural alcove, shielded from the entrance by a veil of hanging icicles that dripped like slow tears. Gently, he lowered her onto a bed of frozen moss, its white expanse stained crimson as her wound wept. Celine's breath came in shallow gasps, the pain a roaring fire in her shoulder, radiating down her arm in waves that blurred the world to smears of shadow and silver. The pendant lay exposed against her collarbone, its etched blood drop gleaming faintly in the dim light filtering from outside, as if it drank her essence. She wanted to curl away from his gaze, to hide the vulnerability that the bullet had torn open, but her body betrayed her, trembling under the weight of his scrutiny. Xian's hands, calloused from years of wielding iron and claw, hovered uncertainly before pressing a strip of his cloak against the gash. The fabric darkened instantly, absorbing the flow, and his touch, rough, urgent, sent a jolt through her, not just of pain, but of something warmer, forbidden. His scent enveloped her. Pine smoke and iron blood, laced with the wild musk of an alpha, pushed to the brink. "Hold still," he murmured, voice a gravelly command softened by the cave's hush. His stormy eyes met hers, searching, as if he could unravel the silence that bound her. Recognition flickered there, piecing together the fragments of her face from the castle's hearth-lit corners. Selina Varen, the mute one, exiled for her uselessness. And now this, her body a shield he had never deserved. Outside, the wind howled its fury, carrying the distant crack of branches under pursuit. The hunters would not relent. Their silver was forged for vengeance, old grudges against the packs that had claimed their kin in border skirmishes. Thorn's betrayal had led them here, the beta's whispers painting Tian as a lone target, ripe for the kill. But Celine's intervention had shattered that isolation, drawing her into the fray like a thread pulled from fate's loom. She winced as he bound the wound tighter, the pressure forcing a silent cry from her lips, nothing but a rasp, swallowed by the stone. Empathy stirred in her chest, unbidden. She saw the fractures in him now. Up close. The scar along his jaw, a pale river across his skin, spoke of wars won at the cost of souls. His lost mate, Alara, haunted those gray depths, a queen slain by treachery, her death the guilt that hollowed him, turning duty into a crown of thorns. "Why did you do it?" Kian asked again, his voice dropping to a whisper as he leaned back on his heels, blood-smeared hands flexing. The question hung between them, heavy as the icicles above, demanding an answer her throat could not yield. Celine's eyes burned, the words "Qian" echoing in her mind, the single syllable she had forced out in the clearing, now a dam against the flood. She reached for the pendant, fingers brushing its warmth, and in that touch, a spark ignited. Not just memory, but something deeper, a pull like the moon on tides. He noticed, his gaze narrowing on the silver crescent, the blood drop within it mirroring the stains on her skin. "It's old packwork," he said, almost to himself, recognition dawning. "Your mother's, wasn't it? The one who wove lunar charms before the frost wars." She nodded, the motion slight, but it bridged the silence, a fragile thread. Outside, A shout pierced the gale, hunters closing in, their boots thudding like war drums on the snow. Kian's body tensed, instincts flaring. He rose, positioning himself at the alcove's edge, claws extending with a soft snick. "Stay down," he growled, but there was no command in it, only protection, a vow etched in the lines of his frame. Celine pushed herself up, ignoring the fire in her shoulder, her good hand fumbling for a loose stone from the floor, crude, but a weapon in desperate hands. The bond stirred again, instinctive, weaving through the pain. Not just Alpha and Omega, but two exiles, bound by the night's cruelty. The first hunter breached the cave mouth, silhouette hulking against the moonlight, rifle glinting like a fang. Cian lunged, a blur of shadow and fury, slamming the man against the wall with bone-crunching force. Blood sprayed, warm and metallic, spattering the ice in vivid arcs. But another followed, silver blade drawn, lunging past Cian toward the alcove. Celine moved without thought, hurling the stone with all her fading strength. It struck true, glancing the hunter's temple, staggering him long enough for Cian to whirl and finish the threat, claws rending flesh in a spray of red that painted the walls like war banners. The third hesitated at the threshold, eyes widening at the sight. The king, bloodied but unbroken, and the wounded Omega rising behind him, her gaze fierce, unyielding. A final shot rang out, wild and desperate, ricocheting off the stone with a whine that set Celine's teeth on edge. Cian shoved her down, his body a shield now, the bullet grazing his arm in a shallow furrow. They dispatched the last together, he with lethal precision, she with a kick that toppled the man into the snow beyond, where the wind claimed his screams. Silence fell, broken only by their ragged breaths. The cave a sanctuary stained with the evidence of their shared defiance. Cian turned to her, chest heaving, and for the first time, his hand cupped her cheek, not as king to subject, but as one survivor to another. The touch lingered, warm against the cold, empathy blooming into something tender, resisted yet undeniable. In her eyes, he saw the depth of her silence, the love that had driven her to this madness. And in his, she glimpsed the crack in his armor, the guilt yielding to wonder. The pendant pulsed between them, a heartbeat in the quiet as the storm outside raged on. But here, in the refuge's dim glow, the first threads of a bond wove tight, born of blood and choice, a redemption neither had sought. Yet as the hunter's distant howls faded, Celine felt the stir of something more, a hidden gift awakening in her veins, lunar and fierce, waiting to reveal itself under the moon's unblinking eye. The cave's shadows clung like reluctant lovers as the first hints of dawn bled through the icicles, turning their edges to fragile prisms of pale gold. Celine lay against the mossy alcove, her shoulder a throbbing forge where pain hammered relentlessly, each pulse drawing beads of sweat that cooled instantly in the chill air. The pendant rested heavy on her chest, its blood drop etching seeming to deepen with every labored breath, as if it fed on the chaos of the night. Cian's touch lingered in her memory, his hand on her cheek, rough yet reverent, igniting a warmth that warred with the frost seeping from the stone. She had glimpsed the fracture in him then, the king's armor cracked by her sacrifice, revealing not just an alpha's duty, but a man's quiet despair. Yet fear coiled in her gut, sharp as the silver that had pierced her. This bond, instinctive and raw, threatened to unravel the silence she had worn like a shroud. He knelt nearby, binding his own grazed arm with strips torn from his cloak, the fabric stiff with drying blood that flaked away like rust from iron. His breaths came steady now, the wild fury of battle ebbing into a watchful tension, his gray eyes scanning the cave's mouth where the wind whispered threats of pursuit. Thorn's betrayal hung between them unspoken, a specter thicker than the damp air. The beta's ambition had poisoned the pack's veins long before this ambush, whispers of southern alliances festering like wounds left untended. Kian had sensed it, the erosion of loyalty, but guilt had blinded him, chaining him to the throne even as it isolated him in the wilds. Now, with Celine's blood on his hands, that isolation shattered, replaced by a curiosity that burned brighter than the torch he kindled from scavenged tinder. Flames leaped to life in a shallow depression, their orange glow dancing across his scarred features, casting hollows where shadows pooled like unspoken regrets. "You fight like one born to it," he said, his voice a low rumble that vibrated through the stone, pulling her gaze to his. There was no command in it, only a probing gentleness that made her chest tighten. Celine shifted, wincing as the movement tugged at her wound, the metallic tang of blood mingling with the smoke curling from the fire. She wanted to look away, to retreat into the sanctuary of her muteness, but his eyes held her, stormy depths reflecting the flames like distant lightning. The pendant warmed again, insistent, its heat spreading through her veins like liquid moonlight, stirring something dormant, a whisper from the goddess's own breath, long buried under layers of rejection and silence. Outside, the storm's howl softened to a mournful keen, but the world beyond stirred with peril. Distant weavos pierced the gale, not wolves, but the pack's corrupted echoes, Thorn's spies closing the net. Cian rose, his silhouette towering against the firelight, muscles coiling beneath his bloodied shirt as he listened. "They're coming," he murmured, more to himself than her, the weight of his crown pressing visibly on his shoulders. He had fled the castle seeking clarity, a solitary hunt to purge the ghosts of Alara's death. But fate had woven Celine into his path, a silent thread pulling him from the abyss. He turned back to her, crouching low, his hand hovering near the pendant as if drawn by its subtle glow. It calls to something in me, like the old lunar rites before the wars twisted our blood." Celine's heart stuttered, the warmth in the pendant surging, flooding her with visions unbidden. Silver paths threading through snow-choked forests, hidden trails illuminated by an inner light, leading not just to safety, but to truths buried in the peaks. It was no mere trinket. It was her inheritance, the Pathfinder's gift her mother had whispered of in dying breaths, a rare omega trait to sense the weave of destiny, to guide the lost through shadows of betrayal and blood. Rejection had silenced it, the pack's scorn deeming it worthless, but here, in this refuge forged of desperation, it awakened. Her vision sharpened, the cave's walls fading as ethereal lines etched the air, roots of escape flickering like veins of ore under moonlight, pointing toward a forgotten temple in the higher crags, where the goddess's altars still hummed with ancient power. She gasped, the sound raw and involuntary, her good hand clutching the pendant as the gift manifested in a rush of sensation. The wind's secrets, the earth's hidden pulses, the moon's pull revealing Thorn's treachery in stark clarity, maps of deceit, alliances sealed in southern blood oaths, aimed at Cian's throat. Her eyes widened, locking on his, and for the first time, she moved with purpose, tracing a finger through the air, drawing invisible lines that mirrored the visions. Cian froze, his breath catching as understanding dawned, the flames reflecting in his eyes like stars aligning. You see it," he whispered, awe threading his voice, roughened by disbelief. "The paths, the old gift, the Pathfinder. Alara spoke of it once, a legend to heal the pack's fractures. But you? Exiled for silence, not for this." The realization struck him like a claw to the chest, unraveling the guilt that had bound him. Celine was no burden. She was the key, the lunar compass to navigate the storms of war and betrayal, her silence a vessel for the goddess's unvoiced wisdom. He reached for her hand, enveloping it in his, the contact electric, a bond deepening from empathy to destiny's forge. Yet resistance flickered in her, the fear of being seen, truly seen, after years of invisibility. Love was no reward here. It was a trial, demanding she yield her hidden strength to a king who had once cast her aside. The fire crackled, spitting embers that danced like fireflies in the dim, and outside, the weavos grew nearer, a chorus of judgment closing in. Cian pulled her to her feet, his arms steady around her waist, the shared warmth a bulwark against the cold. "Show me," he urged, voice laced with the melancholy of a man glimpsing redemption. Celine nodded, the pendant pulsing in rhythm with her resolve, and together they stepped toward the cave's edge, her gift illuminating the way, a silver thread through the white labyrinth toward confrontation and choice. The moon watched from above, its light filtering through the storm, bathing them in ethereal silver as the first shadows of the pursuing pack crested the ridge, eyes gleaming with feral intent. Subscribe if you believe mercy can crown even the fallen. The silver paths unfurled before Celine like veins of moonlight etched into the snow, guiding their steps through the labyrinth of crags where the wind carved frozen sentinels from the peaks. Her shoulder throbbed with each jolt, a relentless drumbeat echoing the pendant's pulse against her skin, its blood drop etching now a mirror to the crimson trails they left behind. Cian's arm encircled her waist, a steady anchor in the gathering storm, his warmth seeping through the chill like embers defying the frost. Yet doubt gnawed at her edges, sharp as the icicles shattering under their boots, the gift she had hidden for so long now exposed, binding her to the very king who had exiled her. Was this redemption, or another chain forged in silence? The moon hung low, bloated and watchful, casting their shadows long and twisted across the white expanse, as if the goddess herself traced their fates in silver ink. They crested a ridge where the pines thinned to skeletal husks, the air thick with the scent of pine resin and impending blood. Below, in a hollow scarred by ancient avalanches, the pack waited, not as allies, but as executioners cloaked in fealty. Torches flickered like dying stars, their flames guttering against the gale, illuminating faces twisted by loyalty's cruel fracture. Thorn stood at the forefront, his beta frame clad in iron-etched leathers, eyes gleaming with the cold ambition that had festered unchecked. Beside him loomed Garrick, the Southern Alpha rival, a hulking shadow from the Ember clans, his fur cloak stained with the ash of conquered hearths, his gaze a predator's promise of war. The pack flanked them, a ragged circle of wolves and men, their howls rising in a dissonant chorus that rattled the stones, mingling with the wind's wail like a dirge for the fallen. Cian halted at the ridge's lip, his body tensing against hers, muscles coiling like a bowstring drawn taut. "Thorn," he growled, the name a thunderclap rolling through the hollow, his voice laced with the melancholy of betrayal's bitter harvest. Celine felt the tremor in him, not just rage, but the weight of a king's fractured trust. The guilt over Alara's death now compounded by this. His pack turned against him under whispers he had failed to silence. She clung to the pendant, its warmth surging as visions sharpened, threads of deceit weaving through the group, marking the traitors with ethereal red, paths diverging into blood-soaked futures. Freedom beckoned in one direction, the wilds beyond, where she could vanish into silence once more. But love pulled the other toward the heart of the storm, demanding she stand with him. Thorn stepped forward, his smile a blade unsheathed, torchlight carving hollows in his angular face. "My king," he sneered, the title dripping venom. "You flee like a whelp, dragging an exile into your shame. The pack sees your weakness. The southern winds carry Garrick's strength, alliances sealed in fire and blood. Yield the throne and spare us the war your guilt invites." The words struck Celine like frostbite. Echoing the rejection that had driven her into the wilds, her silence deemed a curse. Yet now, with Cian's side pressed to hers, she saw the lie in Thorn's eyes. The beta's hunger not for the pack's good, but for power's throne, his pact with Garrick, a betrayal born of envy. Garrick laughed, a guttural rumble that shook the snow from nearby branches, his claws flexing as he eyed Cian with predatory relish. "The rook line ends tonight," he declared, his voice thick with the South's smoky drawl, "under the moon that favors the bold, not the haunted." The pack shifted, murmurs rippling like wind through reeds, some eyes flickering with doubt, others burning with coerced fervor. Weavos rose again, closer now, encircling the hollow as more shadows emerged from the tree line, Thorn's spies, the corrupted heart of the once unbroken fold. Cian released Selene gently, stepping forward, his scarred jaw set in grim resolve. "You speak of weakness, Thorn, but it is you who sells our blood for scraps. Ilara's death was your shadow's work. I see it now." His gray eyes stormed, guilt yielding to clarity, the fire of ethical fury igniting within. He glanced back at her, a silent plea in his gaze, and Selene's heart fractured. Love or freedom? To reveal her gift fully meant claiming a place in this fray, risking the silence that had been her shield, her identity. Forgiveness for Cian's past decree warred with the urge to flee, to let war consume them without her tether. The pendant burned hotter, visions flooding her. If she guided him now, paths to victory through mercy, sparing the pack's innocence. If she withheld, isolation's cold embrace, her love unclaimed in the blood that would flow. The confrontation erupted as Thorn lunged, blade drawn in a silver arc that caught the moonlight, aiming for Cian's throat. The king parried with claw and fury, the clash ringing like iron on stone, blood spraying in fine mists that froze midair. Garrick charged, a behemoth of muscle and rage, barreling through the pack to join the melee, his blows landing with bone-jarring force that sent Cian staggering. Selene's world narrowed to the chaos, torches toppling into snow, hissing steam rising as flames met frost, howls turning to snarls, the air thick with the coppery reek of opened veins. She moved on instinct, the Pathfinder's gift blazing, silver lines illuminating safe havens amid the press, directing Cian with urgent gestures, her hand slicing the air like a blade of light. One path led her between Thorn and a faltering packmate, the beta's knife poised to strike down a young wolf torn by doubt. She stepped in, silent but unyielding, shoving the youth aside as Thorn's blade grazed her arm, drawing a shallow line that welled warm and red. He whirled on her, eyes widening in contempt. "The mute whore," he spat, "thinking silence makes you queen." But in that moment, choice crystallized, not war's blind fury, but compassion's edge. She traced a path with her finger, the ethereal line coiling around Thorn's feet, tripping him into the snow where Cian's boot pinned him, claws at his throat. Garrick roared, seizing the opening to slam into Cian, the two alphas tumbling in a whirlwind of fangs and fists, blood painting the white ground in abstract strokes of deep crimson. Selene's visions fractured under the strain, the pendant searing her skin, but she pressed forward, weaving through the fray to reach them. Love demanded this, not as reward, but as proof, a moral forge where freedom's solitude paled against the bond's redemptive fire. She positioned herself at the melee's edge, her gestures pulling Cian clear of a fatal strike, guiding his counter that raked Garrick's side, forcing the rival to retreat with a bellow of pain. The pack faltered, the tide shifting as innocence broke from Thorn's sway, their howls turning to cries of allegiance. Thorn writhed under Cian's hold, pleading now, ambition crumbling into desperation. "Mercy, my king. The South's gold blinded me." Cian's eyes met Selene's across the bloodied snow, the question burning there. Forgiveness or the blade? Her nod was slight, the pendant's pulse a shared heartbeat. Mercy, not for him, but for the pack's soul. The ethical path her gift revealed. Cian hesitated, melancholy etching deeper lines on his face, then withdrew his claws, binding Thorn with iron manacles forged from the fallen torch's remnants. Garrick fled into the storm, his howls fading like echoes of a defeated god, the rival's threat shattered but not slain. As the pack regrouped, wary eyes on their king and the silent Omega at his side, Selene felt the weight of judgment lift, replaced by a deeper dilemma. Her gift had saved them, but at what cost to her hidden heart? The moon dipped lower, bathing the hollow in silver absolution, yet the wind carried whispers of wars yet to come, choices that would test if love could truly redeem the broken throne. Cian's hand found hers amid the settling snow, a tentative bridge, but in her chest, the fire of acceptance warred with the shadows of what she still could not voice. The snow in the hollow settled like a shroud over the fallen, each flake a silent witness to the blood that had thawed the frost. Selene's fingers intertwined with Cian's, the warmth of his palm a fragile tether against the encroaching cold. Yet it stirred a tempest within her, waves of longing crashing against the rocks of her unvoiced truth. The pendant hung between her breasts, its blood drop etching pulsing with the rhythm of her doubt, as if the goddess herself questioned the path she had illuminated. The pack encircled them now, a ragged ring of furred shadows and wary eyes, their breaths clouding the air in uneven huffs, the metallic tang of spilled life lingering like an accusation. Thorn knelt bound in the snow, his once sharp features slack with defeat, iron manacles biting into his wrists, drawing thin rivulets that mirrored the crimson stains on the ground. Garrick's flight had left a void, his howls echoing faintly from the southern ridges, a promise of retribution that hung heavier than the moon's silver gaze. Cian released her hand slowly, the separation a chill that seeped deeper than the wind, and stepped toward the traitor, his boots crunching the bloodied crust like judgments unspoken. The pack murmured, a low undercurrent of fracture, some shifting loyally closer, others holding back, their gazes flicking between king and captive, doubt etched in the lines of their frost-bitten faces. Selene felt it all through the pendant's thrum, visions flickering at the edges of her sight, silver threads weaving through the crowd, some golden with redemption, others fraying into black despair. Her gift, awakened and insistent, revealed the pack's hidden wounds, the ghosts of Alara's murder, Thorn's whispers that had poisoned loyalties like venom in the well. She had guided them to this mercy, sparing Thorn's life not for his sake, but for the innocents who might yet be swayed back from war's brink. Yet now, standing at the periphery, freedom whispered seductively. Slip away into the tree line, let the pack's chaos consume itself, reclaim the silence that had shielded her heart from this raw exposure. Why mercy, Selene? Cian's voice cut through the hush, turning back to her with eyes that stormed like gathering thunder, the melancholy of his guilt now laced with a plea for understanding. He had seen her nod, felt the ethical pull of her gift, but the weight of betrayal pressed on him, Alara's phantom blood crying for justice in his veins. The pack leaned in, the air thickening with their collective breath, the fire of torches casting elongated shadows that danced like specters of the past. Thorn lifted his head, eyes gleaming with desperate cunning. "She sees what you cannot, my king," he rasped, voice hoarse from the cold and the fall. "The mute's visions, lunar tricks to bind you. Garrick's forces mass beyond the passes. Mercy invites slaughter. Kill me, reclaim your throne with blood, or watch the rook line crumble as Alara did." The words struck Selene like a blade to the gut, twisting the pendant's warmth into searing heat, visions surging unbidden, paths diverging in vivid clarity. One led to war, Thorn's execution igniting the pack's fury, alliances fracturing into civil strife, rivers of blood freezing the peaks in eternal winter. The other, Mercy's gamble, forgiveness as a bridge, drawing the wavering wolves back, but risking Cian's soul to the South's encroaching flame. Love or liberty? To stay meant voicing her place through actions alone, binding her fate to his redemption, her silence no longer a veil, but a chain. To flee was to choose the wild's embrace, her unspoken feelings a secret buried in snow, free but forever shadowed by what might have healed him. She stepped forward, the snow yielding under her boots with a soft sigh, her wounded shoulder a distant roar beneath the surge of her gift. The pack parted instinctively, their eyes widening at the silent Omega who had woven their salvation from ethereal lines. Kian's gaze locked on hers, a storm of conflict mirroring her own, the duty of a king warring with the man who had glimpsed her depth in the cave's firelight. "Speak your choice," he urged, though he knew her throat's betrayal, his hand gesturing to Thorn as if offering the blade himself. But it was her moral forge now, the Pathfinder's burden, compassion over vengeance, proving that strength lay not in the claw's strike, but in the heart's restraint. Visions crested like a wave, the pendant blazing against her skin, illuminating a hidden truth. Thorn's treachery stemmed not just from ambition, but from a deeper scar, a brother's death in Cian's wars, twisted into hatred by unspoken grief. Celine knelt before the beta, her good hand tracing a silver path in the snow between them, the ethereal line glowing faintly, revealing to all the threads of his pain woven into the pack's tapestry. Gasps rippled through the circle, wolves murmuring as the gift unveiled the fractures. Not one traitor, but a web of old wounds festering under the crown's weight. Thorn's defiance cracked, tears freezing on his lashes, the wind carrying his broken whisper, "I lost everything to your endless fights." Kian staggered, the realization a physical blow, his scarred jaw clenching as Alara's ghost intertwined with this new specter of guilt. "War or forgiveness?" he echoed her internal cry, voice raw as the exposed earth beneath the snow. The pack held its breath, the moon's light pooling around them like spilled silver, the distant weavos of Garrick's remnants, a drumbeat urging violence. Celine rose, meeting Kian's eyes, her silence a profound eloquence. Mercy for the pack's renacimento, even if it meant her love remained a shadow, unclaimed. She nodded toward Thorn, then to the horizon, her gesture weaving a path of uneasy peace. Exile him to the borders, let him face the South's judgment, sparing the innocents while honoring the ethical blade of compassion. The king hesitated, melancholy etching rivers down his face, the fire of war tempting his alpha blood. Yet her gaze held him, the bond's pull a redemptive anchor, forcing the choice. Not blind slaughter, but a measured grace that might heal the fractures she had revealed. With a nod, heavy as the crown he bore, Cian hauled Thorn to his feet, shoving him toward the tree line with a growl that brooked no argument. "Go. Carry your shame to Garrick's door. Betray us again, and no path will save you." The beta stumbled away, vanishing into the swirling snow, the pack's howls shifting from rage to a tentative chorus of unity, the silver threads in Celine's vision glowing brighter, mending what war would have torn. But as the hollow quieted, embers of torches hissing in the melt, Celine felt the cost carve into her soul. Freedom slipped further from grasp, her heart laid bare in gestures that spoke louder than words. Yet the shadows of her unspoken love lingered, a spiritual dilemma. Could she heal him fully without sacrificing the silence that defined her? Kian's hand found hers again, squeezing with a tenderness born of shared trial. But in the moon's unyielding watch, the question burned. Would union demand her voice, or would redemption claim them both in quiet absolution? The wind rose, carrying the scent of blood and possibility, as the peaks loomed like silent judges, awaiting the final forge. The moon's silver veil thinned as dawn clawed its way over the iron peaks, painting the hollow in hues of fragile gold and lingering shadow, where the snow drank the last echoes of blood like a parched earth. Celine stood at the ridge's edge, Kian's hand still warm in hers, a bridge forged in the night's crucible, yet trembling under the weight of unspoken fractures. The pack dispersed below, their forms weaving through the pines like ghosts reclaiming their forms, howls softening to murmurs of tentative renewal. Thorn's exile had carved a path of mercy through the storm, the beta's stumbling silhouette vanishing into the southern mists, but the air hummed with the unresolved. Garrick's distant roars a thunder on the horizon, promising wars that mercy alone could not quench. The pendant at her throat cooled now, its blood drop etching a quiet sentinel, mirroring the slow seep of her own wounds, both seen and hidden. She pulled away gently, the separation a chill that burrowed deeper than the frost, her eyes tracing the silver threads fading from her vision. The Pathfinder's gift had illuminated the pack's salvation, weaving compassion into the fray's red tapestry, but it demanded a toll. Her silence, once a sanctuary, now a cage pressing against the swell of feelings she could no longer contain. Love had resisted her, rationalized as a fool's ember in the castle's indifferent hearths. Yet here it bloomed, raw and insistent, demanding acceptance, not as a crown, but as a scar to bear. Cian turned to her, his gray eyes reflecting the dawn's hesitant light, the melancholy of his reign etched deeper by the night's revelations, the guilt of Alara's loss now intertwined with gratitude, a king's duty yielding to the vulnerability of a man glimpsed in her gaze. "We return to the castle," he said, voice a low cadence like wind through ravines, laced with the ethical gravity of choices yet to unfold. "The pack needs its king, and you are its unseen heart." His words hung heavy, an invitation wrapped in the crown's thorns, but Selene felt the pull of sacrifice coil in her chest. To union meant stepping into the throne's shadow, her gift a tool for his redemption, her love the quiet force to heal the wounds that silver and betrayal had carved. Yet freedom lingered in the wild's call, a solitary path where she could vanish, her voice forever her own secret, unclaimed by the pack's judgments or his stormy depths. The wind rose, carrying the faint crackle of distant fires, Garrick's camps igniting, the South's hunger a flame that would test this fragile peace. She shook her head, slight but resolute, her good hand rising to the pendant, fingers tracing its crescent as visions flickered one final time. Paths converging in the castle's great hall, where torches would blaze against black stone, and her silence would either bind or break them. Cian stepped closer, his scarred hand cupping her face, thumb brushing the line of her jaw with a tenderness that ignited the air between them. "Selene," he murmured, the name a revelation on his lips, echoing the single word she had forced in the clearing. His own, a syllable that had shattered walls. "You saved me from silver, from myself. Do not exile your light now." His touch stirred the bond, visceral and deep, the musk of his skin mingling with pine and blood, her body responding with a heat that warred against the cold knot of fear. He was broken, this Alpha King, his ethics a melancholy forge, guilt the chain that had isolated him until her step between him and death. The pack gathered at the hollow's base, their eyes lifting to the ridge, wary, wondering, the silver threads of loyalty mending under her gift's subtle glow. A young wolf, the one she had shielded from Thorn's blade, approached with a low whine, nuzzling her cloak's hem, an instinctive acknowledgement that rippled through the group. Selene's throat burned, words clawing upward like roots through frozen soil, the pendant flaring warm as if the goddess breathed life into her muteness. Sacrifice or union? The dilemma etched spiritual fire in her veins. To heal him meant yielding her hidden self, proving love as redemption's proof, not a gentle reward. Freedom tempted with isolation's peace, but the bond's pull was lunar, inexorable, drawing her toward the castle's iron gates, where true renascimento awaited. She met Cian's gaze, the storm in his eyes yielding to a quiet plea, and in that moment, choice crystallized like ice under moonlight. Her free hand pressed over his on her cheek, guiding it to the pendant, the shared touch a vow in silence. No words escaped, but her eyes spoke volumes, the acceptance of union, not as surrender, but as the final weave of their fates, her love the balm for his wounds, his redemption the light piercing her shadows. A soft gasp escaped her, not quite a word, but a breath that carried the essence of together, the first crack in her veil since the bullet's bite. Kian drew her into his arms, enveloping her in wolf pelts and steady warmth, his heartbeat a drum against hers, the wind's howl fading to a hush as the pack's weavos rose in harmony below, a chorus of rebirth. Blood and fire yielding to the moon's forgiving grace. They descended the ridge as one, the snow yielding to their steps, the pendant's pulse sinking with the dawn's first true light. Garrick's threat loomed, wars unspoken in the southern passes, but here, in this union forged of choice and quiet strength, the broken found healing, not in victory's roar, but in the ethical mercy that crowned them both. Celine's heart, once a silent ember, burned steady now, the love she had never voiced blooming into destiny's flame, proving that every Omega's silence held the power to redeem a king's endless winter. The peaks watched, eternal and unyielding, as the castle's silhouette emerged through the mist, a beacon of scars and possibility, where their story would etch itself into the stone, a tragedy transmuted to legend under the eternal moon. If your heart beat alongside ours, like, comment, and subscribe. Because every soul that joins our moon keeps the flame of redemption alive.